Hello and welcome to Retro Encounter episode 136. I am Mike Sollosi. I am your host for this evening or morning or whatever time it is for you, listener, because this is not a live podcast. And even though it may not be the present, I am currently talking to Keegan Lee.
Hello, everyone.
And Hilary Andreff.
Hi, everyone.
Now, I have taken Keegan away from his time living in the Florida sunshine and taken time away from Hilary being a very busy grad student for something very selfish. Around a year and a half ago, we did a special confession episode with our Retro Encounter regulars, Nick Ransbottom and Alana Higgs, in which they confessed to me of RPGs they hadn't played, and we all felt much better for repenting. And so we're going to do another one of these with two new panelists. So we're going to confess about RPGs we haven't played, and then try to make each other smarter and better through discussing these sins we have committed by not playing these games. Sure. Wow, that was weird and Catholic, and I apologize. But unlike Catholicism, there is no shame at all in this podcast episode. It's only learning, only celebrating, 100% positive attitude. So are you guys ready to confess?
You know it.
I think so.
Okay, alright, okay. I detect some nervousness, but it's fine. Keegan, we're going to have you go first. Keegan, how long has it been since your last confession?
It has been 25 years,
My
I
goodness.
believe, as I have never gone to church. But for me, my two big confessions are two series that I've always wanted to get into.
Okay, we're doing them one at a time.
Oh, yes, of course.
So just so it doesn't matter, listeners, that's how we're going to do it. Similar to the episode from 2016, each of us has two games we've prepared to confess, and we're going to take turns confessing them and then discussing them. So Keegan, please tell us your first game or series which you have not played.
My first series is the Breath of Fire series for the Super Nintendo and PlayStation series.
All right. Now, I have played a few Breath of Fire games. I, in fact, podcasted about one of them a few months ago on 2 episodes of Retro Encounter. So, Keegan, before Hilary and I start talking more about Breath of Fire to the best of our knowledge, what is your impression of the Breath of Fire series? Like, what do you think it is?
Okay, so what it seems like to me, from an outsider's point of view, it seems like one of those very eccentric RPGs where it kind of goes crazy with the story, has super interesting characters and abilities, just stuff that you don't see in other JRPGs. At least that's what it sounds like to me.
All right. Now, Hilary, how much Breath of Fire have you played, if any?
I've actually just played 4 a long while ago.
Okay.
Oh.
So I'm marginally more experienced than Hilary is with Breath of Fire, I guess. I have played parts of Breath of Fire 1 and 3, but neither of them grabbed me that much. I think I put less than 5 hours into each of them. But I have beaten 2 and 4. And I've never touched Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, which is the 5th one, which is more of a roguelike RPG. It's a PS2 game. And I have not touched Breath of Fire 6, which was a mobile-only game in Japan that had its servers shut down after less than a year. It didn't seem like a very successful mobile game. But I know 2 and 4 well, and I know 1 and 3 a little bit. The first 2 were Super Nintendo, and the third and fourth were PS1. It's fair to say that the character designs are unique. It's for a while it was Capcom's pretty much only RPG series that they were developing in-house. The main character is always named Ryu, and he always has some kind of dragon transforming power or dragon powers. And the other characters besides Ryu that you meet throughout the game are often a real wacky variety of cast members. A lot of the times they're sort of anthropomorphic animal looking. Now, Hilary, you mentioned you played Breath of Fire 4. Yeah, do you remember the rest of the cast other than Ryu in that game?
A little bit here and.
Now this is an unfair question because I just played it a few months ago, so it's pretty fresh in my mind.
No, that's okay. Nina comes to mind pretty quickly. I think she has a pretty pivotal role.
There's every Breath of Fire game also has a winged girl named Nina.
Ah, okay.
Go.
Now, is there a direct correlation between like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and like how there's always Ryu's and Ninas?
I don't think so because the worlds seem very dissimilar between the different games. In Breath of Fire 2, the world is sort of dominated by this church that has a dark secret, and there's churches everywhere, and there was a sort of a good versus evil conflict many years ago that is resurfacing again. And in Breath of Fire 4, there's two large kingdoms. One is the sort of the Eastern Kingdom is like deserts and plains, and the Western Kingdom is like mountains and rivers. And one is sort of more like European style, and one's more sort of Asian style. The commonalities between Breath of Fire games are the kinds of characters. Like there's a lot of dog people and cat people, which are separate races called grass runners and warrens, and a lot of like just some real weirdos. Like in Breath of Fire 2, there's a basically a tree man named I forget his name. But there's like a plant man that, depending on how you combine his powers, he'll transform into different stages of being a tree or shrub.
Okay.
And in Breath of Fire 4, the six main cast members are Ryu and Nina, like usual, a drunk dog samurai, a club wielding tiger man, a robot possessed by an ancient spirit, and a fox lady with that has a gun and like fire spells. It's like the characters in the Breath of Fire games. It's a lot of anthropomorphic animal humans and a lot of really colorful characters. I really enjoyed the 2 that I played. I think Breath of Fire 4 is better than 2. And I feel like I should give 3 another chance, because I got bored with it quickly when I tried playing it over a decade ago, but it's been a long time.
Might be worth a shot.
Maybe.
Yeah, and just to go a little bit more into kind of the background of 4, because you mentioned 2 being sort of like a church with a dark secret. 4, it's more about an ancient force that's actually kind of been split in 2, and your protagonist is kind of one half of that duality. So like that's sort of one of the themes, which sounds pretty different from 2.
Oh yeah, there's a yin-yang theme going on in 4, and this isn't really a spoiler because it happens in the first hour of the game, but most of the game you're Ryu traveling and trying to help the people that you've met along the way, and you're basically just a little do-gooding dragon boy. But periodically the player is put in the shoes of the main antagonist, Fo Lu, who's wandering, who is an ancient like super being that has been revived from 1,000-year slumber, and he's trying to reclaim his throne, and the current seat of power in his former empire does not want him to claim his throne. So
I always thought that was really cool.
It's super cool, and Fo Lu is like maybe the coolest character in any Fire Emblem. any Breath of Fire game. I think that Breath of Fire is worth a shot. Breath of Fire 4 is the best one, but 2 is an all right Super Nintendo game. And like 3 seems cool, but I fell off that one quickly when I played it a while ago.
The soundtrack from 4.
Oh yes,
that is, I don't know. Personally, yeah, I listen to it a lot. So
yeah, it does have cool music, and she wasn't the main composer on it, but Yoko Shimomura, a legend in the game music composition industry, contributed to Breath of Fire 1's soundtrack when she was on Capcom's music staff.
Oh,
that makes sense.
Yeah, but like Capcom, like a lot of the Capcom games on the NES and Super Nintendo were sort of done by committee, so like Yoko Shimomura did more than half of the Street Fighter 2 music, but she was not like one of 4 people that worked on it or something.
right.
That factoid comes up often, probably because I love Shimomura and love Street Fighter, but that's not important. Keegan, thank you for sharing with us your lack of Breath of Fire experience. Hilary, now it's your turn. Hilary, how long has it been since your last confession?
Never formally. So.
All right. It would be rude to ask a lady of her age indirectly by giving a year number, so we're gonna skip on that. And Hilary, please give us your first game.
So this is a pretty long-running series that I have also been meaning to get into but haven't, and that is Ys.
Oh, Ys. I don't want to be a hipster and say I've been on the Ys bandwagon since the beginning. That would be false. I tried Ys 3 a long time ago, like between 10 and 15 years ago, and thought it was dumb. But I did get into Ys pretty hard in the around maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and was captivated almost immediately. I am a big Ys fan now, even though it's only been about 5 years. And Hilary, you've been missing out. There's a lot of good ones.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned recently. I've heard people having a lot of fun talking about the protagonist and the battle system, so I'm looking forward to hearing more.
All right, and Keegan, before we have you share your Ys thoughts, Hilary, what's your general impression of Ys, and what do you think the series is about?
So, Ys was the series that I always kind of saw in lists and saw around and wanted to know more about. One, for a very, very long time, and my impression of it is pretty similar to what I said. I've heard the battle system is really responsive, really fun, pretty action-packed, and that the different games are connected character-wise, but they're all kind of independent stories.
Yep, that is all very fair. Ys has great combat. Almost all of them have Adol Kristen as their main character, the red-headed swordsman. Yes. Or Adol the Red. He's the only character in the entire series with red hair. There's every color of the rainbow of hair in that series, other than Adol being the only redhead. And basically, you can treat the entire series as a travelogue of Adol's adventures. He's like a well-known adventurer from the distant past, but he's a different age in each Ys game. I think I'd have to check manuals to double check that. So, Keegan, what's your Ys experience?
So I'm a pretty recent convert to the Ys fandom. I actually started playing last year, I want to say, with Origin on the PC. Mm-hmm. And after, it was fantastic. It was enough to sell me on the entire series. So I haven't played all of them, but I have beaten Origin, and I've dabbled in 1, 2, 4, I want to say. 4 was Selkata, right?
Celceta, yeah. 4 is weird, but I'll get into that. I'll get into that one in a minute.
Yeah, and 6, the Arc of So and So.
Cool.
I'm bad at pronouncing names.
Yeah, and Ys does not play fair with its names. I mean, first of all, it's not even abundantly clear how to pronounce its 2-letter name, and for me, I imagine Terry Bogard confronting the man who killed his father and just going Ys. A little bit of S&K humor there. Yes, I got into Ys in a pretty big way I want to say it was 2013. I'd have to double check my blog for when I wrote all those reviews of them. I played I think 5 Ys games in 4 months or something. Just binging hardcore, playing Oath and Felghana, then the Ys 1 and 2 collection, and then Ys Origin all back to back to back. And it's sort of interesting, before 2000, the Nihon Falcom, controlled the Ys brand, but it was pretty scattered who made all of them. There was at least 3 versions of Ys 4 that were made by different groups each time before 2000. But then after 2000, when they did a 1 and 2 remake that you could probably play on your refrigerator now, it's on so many systems, and then they remade Ys 3, calling it Oath and Felghana, and did a sort of prequel game called Ys Origin, which is I think 1,000 years before Ys 1, but has a bunch of settings from Ys 1 and 2 in it, and then they remade Ys 4, calling it Memories of Celceta, and that Ys 4 remake has elements of the different Ys 4s from the 90s. And Ys 5 has not been remade. That was a PC game from the late 90s, and Ys 6 was made a little bit before the Oath and Felghana remake. So basically, from the Ys 1 and 2 remakes from 2000 onward, they've all of the Ys games were made in-house instead of contracted out, and they've done a much better job of connecting story bits to the past games. There's a character in Memories of Celceta who who's descended from one of the villains in Ys Origin, and she shares his moveset and techniques a little bit. They've done a much better job of connecting the games since 2000 with this run of remakes. And I've played all of them except for 5, which is Japan only and does not have a recent remake, and 8, which I own and is sitting, as a cartridge on my shelf that I have not loaded in yet, but I'm gonna play that later this year, hopefully. And before we can close the Ys discussion, Hilary, I'm a big Ys fan. If you hadn't gathered that already, there's another sort of break in them. The first couple Ys games post 2000 are what I call, the solo Ys games, where you only control one character and you dart around like you're playing a Zelda game, and they're fast and intense, and the combat's great. And then after those three, the next three that they've done, which are East 7, Memories of Celceta, and East 8, those are more like a Secret of Mana game where you control a party of 3 characters. And
Right.
but in both of those, East styles, the combat is really intense and fun, and the characters are great, and Adol is a great protagonist. So I apologize for running my mouth for so long about East. It's something I'm very excited about. Thank you for sharing that with us, Hilary.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I got the impression that it was a very interesting series and that there were a bunch of different games that played a little bit differently, had a slightly different style, but had a good common thread. So
That is exactly accurate. But with the exception of East 2, which I think happens immediately after East 1, you can basically jump into any East game and, Adol's an adventurer and his best friend is Dogi, and you're basically good to go.
perfect.
So, it's my turn to confess. Technically, I have fewer games to work with than maybe you two do, because I did have to confess 2 games in late 2016 for that episode. But I picked 2 other series that I have not played a moment of, and the first of which is Souls. Now, not Soul Calibur, not that song by the Bouncing Souls. I'm talking about Dark Souls and Demon Souls. I have played about 2 hours of Demon Souls, which is the PS3 game, and have not played a single second of any of the Dark Souls games. So,
wow.
Yeah, and if Rob Steinman listened to this podcast, which I sort of doubt he does, he would be in some kind of high-pitched growling at me right now. Because I know
There's a sternly worded letter coming your way right now.
Probably. I know he adores the Souls games, but my general impression of them is, now this is more Dark Souls and less Demon Souls, that they are large, open-ended 3D action games where combat is very deliberate and sort of and focused, and you have to be careful to survive in it, because this world is very dangerous and it will always be trying to kill you. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of cool lore, the boss battles are awesome, the environment is pretty cool to explore, and there is some level of multiplayer where you can jump into other players' worlds and either fight them or assist them, is my understanding of what Dark Souls is. Now, starting with you, Keegan, what's your experience with Dark Souls, and how close am I if you if you know more about the series than I do, which is likely?
It's funny because Demon Souls is the only game in the series I haven't played out of all the Souls games.
Okay.
Well, that's good, because that's one that I have played some of, so...
All right, perfect. So, I'd say you're pretty close when it comes to gameplay and lore-wise, These are very big open-world games. There's a bit of linearity to it, The exits are usually going to be the same, but it's different paths of how you're going to get there and the secrets that you'll find along the way. I do personally really love the lore of Dark Souls. There's a whole lot behind it that, thousands and thousands of YouTube videos exist out there explaining the lore better than I ever could.
It's a really popular game among streamers, and I have, I haven't really watched them myself, but I've seen RPG fan staff link in our Slack channel like explanatory videos of Dark Souls lore. There's a lot of hidden lore there too. It seems more understated and less explicit.
Yes, it never outright tells you like exactly who these characters are. If that makes sense. Like you'll encounter certain bosses and it'll be like, oh, this giant guy with a sword, it's super cool. But then people will figure out, oh, he's related to this giant wolf and they've been best friends for centuries. And there's not a single cutscene that tells you that. You got to discover it.
No, and there's a lot hidden in like item descriptions and conversations in various places as well. Like it's very little bits and pieces.
Yes. Specifically on the multiplayer, you're very close there too, and it works very interestingly. Specifically, sorry, pronounce that weird. Basically, how it's designed is that it's not constant people roaming around like an MMO. People are usually summoned or invaded specifically into your world.
Okay, and so you can request people to help, or can you close off your realm from invasion, or?
Yes, usually to request somebody to help, you have to be in a certain form. The most recent one I played is Dark Souls 3, And to be able to summon somebody, you have to have an Ember activated, which basically boosts all your stats pretty high. It gives you lots of health, all that jazz. And it lets you summon in people who willingly put down, their invitation. So I'm sure if you've seen people like the Knights of the Sun and things like that.
I could be wrong about this, but I remember seeing a news story. Either Demon Souls or Dark Souls 1 or both have their servers closed now. Right?
Demon Souls definitely does.
Okay.
I know that much. Dark Souls 1, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised with the remaster of Dark Souls 1 coming up. If they close it.
That might replace the old version servers. That makes sense.
But
I
think
I haven't been following it that closely.
But it's very cool because I read an interview with Miyazaki, the creator of the Souls games, and he talked about an incident once where he was driving and going uphill in the snow. His car got stuck. Whole bunch of cars in a line, just everybody stuck. All these drivers got together and worked to get everybody out slowly and steadily until everybody was free and on their merry way. And he was talking about later, he was thinking, I wonder what these people are up to now. I'll probably never see them again, but they played such an important part to me for that short time. And that's what inspired him to create this whole random invitation and invasion system for the Soul series. These people that you may never encounter again can play such an important part to you in this game. And I really like that.
That is a very interesting mechanic because, who they are can vary a lot, at least in the first game. And you're right, it's sort of transient. They're there, they can maybe get you out of a really sticky situation, but you're not going to get the same person twice, and they're not going to stay.
And also, I remember reading about this, and I saw some of it when I briefly played Demon Souls 1. Some people can leave messages for other players, and you can sort of like see their ghosts of of how they killed something or how they died. The
bloodstains.
Yes.
Right. I had such a fun time reading those messages.
Yeah, it's very interesting because you don't necessarily type out the messages. You have to choose from preset phrases and preset words. So.
Oh wow.
People have used those in some very interesting ways.
Yes. Never trust a message that tells you, fall in this location.
Right, jump.
Underneath.
Just don't do it.
If you see that message and then like a dozen bloodstains around it, bad sign.
So okay, there's a door with bloodstains all around it, and there's like 8 messages that say "Open this door." Maybe don't trust those 8 messages.
Right, bonfire ahead. Sure.
Yeah, maybe it's just some shared trolling or sarcasm.
Yeah, there's definitely. It feels like it in that community, especially that there's always that goodwill trolling. It's kind of like learn not to trust everything that you see in that game.
I dig that. I can see how that tone would be conveyed.
Yeah,
and it goes perfectly with the world and the series in general. So yeah, I embrace it.
Oh yeah, very, very dark and upsetting world at times. If you find NPCs that you like throughout the story, don't get your hopes up that they'll make it to the end.
All right. Well, thank you for educating me about Dark Souls. I feel enlightened, and I feel slightly more, game curious about that series. Now, each of us has shared one game that we have not played yet, or one game series, more accurately. So we each prepared 2. So now we're going to the second round of that. So Keegan, it's your turn again. Tell us the second game or series which you have not played.
All right. The second one for me, and I notice a lot of people don't talk about it much anymore, is the Grandia series.
Now, you say that, but there was a lengthy Grandia segment on a recent episode of Random Encounter from mid-February, so bad timing with that take, but continue.
Excluding Random Encounter and my friends at RPG Fan, I don't hear many people still speaking on the Grandia series. Now, this one I know even less of than the Breath of Fire series. I've seen a couple of screens, and actually I haven't even seen any single videos of gameplay. But from what I hear about the story, it seems like it's a genuinely fun adventure. It doesn't seem like there's too much of a threat to the world, but it sounds to me more like a group of friends exploring this magical fantasy world. And that sounds really cool to me. I get a little tired of save the world stories every now and then,
Sure. I'm trying to think a little bit because the 3 Grandia games I've played, I've only played a tiny bit of Grandia Extreme, which does not have a great reputation. And I have not played Grandia Online, which I'm not sure exists anymore. But
I didn't know there was a Grandia Online.
Yeah, or maybe it was called World of Grandia or something. But there was some experiment that they did there. But I have beaten Grandia 1 and 2, and I've played about 10 hours of Grandia 3. It was one of those PS2 games I abandoned partway through college because I got busy and distracted. But I think the first 2 are excellent. There is more of a innocent spirit of, a kid wanting to go on an adventure in Grandia 1, while in Grandia 2 it's more like a slightly sullen, like sarcastic anti-hero character gets embroiled in a world-spanning conflict. But they're both
yes.
Justin and Ryudo are both really good protagonists. They're both very good RPGs, and personally what strikes me the most about the Grandia series is the combat. Because combat's turn-based, but every player character and enemy are sort of on the same action meter, and by using stun moves or attacking your enemy when they're at certain positions in their turn order, you can knock them down the meter and cause them to skip turns and lose turns, and it feels really, really good when it works, and it works most of the time, I think.
So it's kind of like the Child of Light game?
Child of Light, stole that from Grandia.
Okay. Well, that was the only comparison I had when you said that.
And a couple of the recent Zeboid RPGs also do that. And as far as I know, it was done first in Grandia.
Okay.
But before I ask Hilary about Grandia, have you played the Lunar games?
I have not.
Okay.
This is another confession I have in there. If I can throw in a third.
No, that's fine. We can pair them together. I get a little bit. I mean, both Lunar and Grandia are designed by Game Arts and were written by the same guy, Takashi Miyaji, who sadly died young. He was only around 45 or 46 when he died.
Wow.
But he worked on Lunar 1 and 2, Grandia 1 and 2, and a bunch of other games with Game Arts. And I think maybe his passing might be part of the reason why they haven't been making a lot of Grandia lately. But his writing is it feels very personal and positive in a fun way. Like when you talk to an NPC, they mentioned this on the Random Encounter episode a few weeks ago. When you talk to an NPC, they won't just say one thing and then you're done with the conversation. Like, you'll actually talk to them, and your party members will comment on them and make fun of Justin or something, because Justin's a bit of a goofball in Grandia 1. But there's
I think that's especially true when Sue's around.
Oh yeah. Sue is another Grandia 1 character who, gives Justin the business nonstop. But both Lunar and Grandia, I think, share a similar aesthetic, like very colorful 90s, early or maybe late 80s even anime, with just a lot of expressive anime faces, and usually there's also a race of beast people or humans with cat-like or bear-like features that made me almost think that Lunar and Grandia take place in the same world, even though they do not. So I think going from Lunar to Grandia, and then Lunar has a more traditional turn-based combat, and Grandia has that cool action meter thing, but it's still turn-based. So I sort of think of those two series as linked in a way, where Grandia has an evolved gameplay design from Lunar. And frankly, I recommend all of them. I like Grandia 1 and 2 a lot. Grandia 3 had even better combat than Grandia 2, but sort of a more boring story, except for your mom. Your mom, the main character's mother, Miranda, basically the first hour or two of Grandia 3 is, "Hey, Mom, I found this girl that fell from the sky, and I need to help her. Can I go on an adventure?" And the mom says, "Absolutely not. You're 16. I'm going on the adventure with you." And then she's a party member for the first half of the story or so.
Aw, that's cool.
Her name's Miranda, but shamefully I don't remember the Grandia 3 main character's name. He was that boring.
Ouch.
Yeah, but I've been talking a lot. Hilary, what's your experience with the Grandia series, or maybe also Lunar, if we're going to talk about both of them together?
I have played some of all of them.
All right. Even Grandia Extreme, because I've only heard music from Grandia Extreme,
excluding Grandia Extreme and Online.
Fair.
1 and 2, actually. I should clarify that. Some of Grandia 1 and 2, and some of Lunar.
So, but what's your general impression of them?
I would say Keegan had it pretty accurate. at least in Grandia 1, there is a really great kind of expansive feeling about exploration and going out into the world, learning, that I really, really, really liked. And I like how it contrasts with the second game so much. It made me really, really glad that I played both of them, honestly. So I'd recommend that.
Justin is very enthusiastic and positive, while Ryudo is very sarcastic and negative, but not like a super jerk negative, in a sort of a like a reluctant hero kind of negative. But I like both of them a lot, and think Grandia 1 and 2 are excellent. They were originally on the Saturn and Dreamcast respectively, but I played them on their ports to the PS1 and PS2 respectively.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen I think 2 on my Steam page show up a couple times.
Yes, I think Grandia 2 does have a Steam port. I do not think Grandia 1 does, but I think you can find Grandia 1 on Vita or PS4 or PS3 or all of those. That's how Derek was playing it when he mentioned he was playing it on Random Encounter.
Okay. All right, sounds awesome.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed Grandia very much. So Hilary, please tell us about the second game or game series that you are confessing not to have played.
All right, so the second series is one that actually shares a developer with the first. I am going to go with the Heroes / Trails series.
Yes. I have played a few of these, but definitely not as many as other RPG fan staff. But before I talk about my Legend of Heroes or Trails of Blank experience, Hilary, what's your general impression of what these games are like?
My general impression of what they're like is that visually they're quite nice. I've mostly heard people saying that it's a really expansive world, kind of a little bit like we were saying with Grandia. It pays to talk to everyone, go back, find everything, because there's an interesting story to piece together there.
I would say this is much more true of Legend of Heroes than for Grandia.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like Grandia is about like the spirit of adventure, and Legend of Heroes is very much about what's happening in this really cool deep world. But please continue.
Okay, that's good to know. I also know that there are a few different offshoots of the series that sort of connect, but not directly, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure. Keep going.
There's like trails. There's like Trails in the Sky and Cold Steel too.
Yeah.
Yep. There's and others, because there's a lot of these games. But I guess that's enough. Legend of Heroes has been around a long time. It sprouted off of an 80s game that Falcom made, maybe it was early 90s, called Dragon Slayer. And then after that, they made 3 Legend of Heroes games, which did come out in the United States on the PSP. But those 3 are bad. Like, one of them is called, I think, Vermilion Tears or something? Hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I actually didn't know that was part of the Trail series.
Yeah, that was it. It's Tear of Vermilion. And then there was also Prophecy of the Moonlight Witch and Song of the Ocean are the 3. Now, so the first Legend of Heroes games were late 80s and called Dragon Slayer. Then those 3 in the 90s, which are called the Gargav trilogy. And the PSP versions of the Gargav trilogy did come out in North America, but they are not good. Like those games are known, in at least among Japanese fans, for having a really beautiful, great script and character work. But the localization is so bad in those PSP games that none of it comes across. And it's just really sort of boring gameplay. But then following that Gargav trilogy, you have the Trails in the Sky trilogy, which are the technically, I guess, Legend of Heroes 6, maybe, I think. And that is the one starring Estelle and Joshua. That was the first really good one, and that was the first one I played. I played the first Trails in the Sky when it came out in 2011 or 2012, and loved it. I thought it was awesome. And I liked it so much that that's when I started researching the old ones and I played one of them and thought it was bad. So those 3 did come out in the United States. The first 2 are sort of complete a single story, and then the third one is kind of like a guide and chapter that that is a third connected story that takes place after the first two. But really, the first two are the first one ends on a cliffhanger, and the second one resolves that cliffhanger. And then they made two sort of spin-off games called Trails in Zero and Trails of Blue, or Trails of Azure, depending on how you translate them. And they take place in a neighboring country that's mentioned a couple times in Trails in the Sky. And now, we're living in 2018, the real sequel to Trails in the Sky is Trails of Cold Steel, which has had 4 games in its little set. The fourth one is not out yet at the time of recording this podcast, but Trails of Cold Steel 1 through 3 are hugely popular. They take place in a different nation next to the Trails in the Sky country. It's actually their rival or enemy nation in some sense, and that takes place in a military academy where that has a conspiracy and then a terrorist attack and then a civil war, which takes over the Trails of Cold Steel story. So I apologize for running my mouth for so long, but my Legend of Heroes experience is I played one of the Gargav trilogy and did not like it. Then I played the first 2 of the Trails in the Sky trilogy and loved them. And I've played the beginning of Trails of Cold Steel 1 and I was impressed. I think it's good, but I have not played much else of it. And but I know it's very, very beloved by other people in RPG fan staff. Mm-hmm. If Rob Steinman was wincing from me mentioning my lack of Dark Souls, this time it was Caitlin Argyros' turn for being furious with me for not having played more Trails of Cold Steel. Because Caitlin, I don't think she likes Trails in the Sky because the visuals didn't appeal to her, but she's a big fan of Trails of Cold Steel, which are for the PC, Vita, PS3, and PS4.
She's probably wincing at my description too, because I know she's.
So Keegan, how many Legend of Heroes or Trails games? What's your experience with them?
Okay, so right now I've only completed Trails in the Sky 1, and I definitely want to continue in the Sky series before I go to Cold Steel. But holy moly, are these games big! I needed a couple of filler games afterwards just to digest, but.
Yeah. Trails in the Sky 1 is a good 30 or 35 hours, and Trails in the Sky second chapter is probably twice as long.
Yeah.
And I have not played them, but I think I've at one point or another I looked on the How Long to Beat pages for the Cold Steel games, and all of them are like 60 hours. It's crazy. These are long, dense RPGs with a lot of walking around and talking to people and backtracking and talking to people and learning more about this big, cool, connected world that is set up. I think you probably can play Cold Steel without going into Sky. Like, minor spoiler, the principal of the Academy of Trails of Cold Steel is one of the playable characters in Trails in the Sky. So, spoiler alert, at least one character in Trails in the Sky survives.
Interesting. Good to know.
Yeah. But you probably could jump into Cold Steel and figure out what's going on and enjoy it on its own, but you'll have a better appreciation for the world and for at least a few of the characters if you play Trails in the Sky first. And so I would recommend playing them in order if you can, because I really love the first 2 in that series, but you probably can get away without it. And there's so many games. Again, like Trails of Cold Steel 4 is not out, so not counting that one, there are 8 long-ass games in this sub-series, and they're very well liked, and the 2 that I've played are excellent. But I mean, I'm not going to be mad at you for not playing them because that's a lot of hours. Good grief.
Yeah, I honestly think that was part of it because they're so big and so rich. I didn't want to get started and then have too much time pass or lose track. So.
Yeah, I understand that. It feels to me like it's one of those games where this can be the only RPG you're playing at the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can like switch around like a little bit of Dragon Quest, a little bit of a Mario game, but like this one needs your full attention.
That sounds like a parody version of Mambo No. 5 that I need in my life.
Yes.
A little bit of Dragon Quest in my life. Super Mario RPG. Well, that's a hard one to put.
Yeah, you should have picked a game that has like fewer than 8 words in its title. But
I'll get there.
But yeah, these are dense, long games, and there's a lot. You'll be doing a lot of reading and a lot of walking.
But they are fun. Do not get me wrong. Even though it sounds, I know personally when I say it, I'm like, oh, this game's really long. It's absolutely worth it.
I'm going to borrow a term that I first heard Rob Fenner mention, another one of our Retro Encounter friends. Um, Trails in the Sky 1 feels like video game tourism because you're these two young people who meet other companions, of course, but they're traveling around the country where they live to try and qualify for being a bracer. Basically a sort of an organization of mercenaries and sort of do-gooders. Like they're trying to qualify for guild membership, and they travel around the world to do so. But in doing so, they sort of see some political machinations and uncover a conspiracy of sorts. And in the second one, I should mention there's a giant cliffhanger at the end of Trails in the Sky 1. And in the second one, they sort of pay off on that conspiracy. Like, your characters are full bracers. They're they go to a lot of the same places you did in the first game, but you're meeting, like, leaders in the evil organization that you're fighting, and it's more character-driven, and the first game is a lot of setup, and the second game is a lot of payoff. And I was so eager to play the second one after playing the first one. It was a long 4 years waiting for that localization. But I adore them. I think Estelle's a little annoying in the first Trails in the Sky, and just is completely a new woman in the second one, and is one of my favorite RPG protagonists ever by the end of the second one. I wholeheartedly recommend those, but they're the only two I've played in the series at length.
All right.
So yeah, Hilary, that is The Legend of Heroes, to the best of my knowledge and description. I guess it's my turn again. This, I think, it might be the oldest series that we've mentioned on the podcast today, and it makes it abundantly clear that I was a Nintendo kid and then a Sony kid and never a Sega kid, except for the very fun 3 years I had a Dreamcast for playing Soul Calibur and Skies of Arcadia. I have never played a single game in the Phantasy Star series. Not the older ones from Master System or Genesis or Mega Drive. None of the Phantasy Star Online or Phantasy Star Universe games. I do not really know what a Hugh Marl is, or whatever those weird class combination names are. And I even listened to 2 entire podcasts of Phantasy Star music or some early episodes of Rhythm Encounter before joining the site even. But I know almost nothing of Phantasy Star, other than it is a sci-fi influenced Japanese RPG in which Phantasy Star 4 is often held up as one of the best Genesis RPGs. But I haven't played any of them, so I can't. I know very little about them. Starting with you, Keegan, do you know anything about Phantasy Star that you can tell me?
All right, so the OG Phantasy Star series 1 through 4, I haven't had a lot of a chance to touch up on. I've played a little bit, but I don't have a lot of experience. The online games in Universe, however, I was a big player of at the time, and I absolutely love those games.
Now, oh shoot, I think did they start on the Dreamcast, or did they go earlier than that?
The online games, I believe, were Dreamcast first. I played the GameCube ports when they were released in the Phantasy Star 1-2 bundle. So, okay. But I believe it was the Dreamcast and their little special online functionality that was the first of it.
I think that is right. I could do some background research, but we'll just assume that's correct, because I don't think there was an online attachment for the Saturn.
Yeah.
But so you did play at least some of the Phantasy Star online / Universe games, and were you? Is it more like a hack and slash standalone RPG, or are they more like online focused on even the GameCube versions?
They definitely feel like they have more of an online focus. I played a lot of couch co-op at the time, which is really nice because you could go straight into the 3 other friends to play it. I'm trying to think of the best comparison I can think of for the series. It's got a little bit of hack and slash, but it definitely has the whole RPG string, especially when it comes to picking your separate classes. Oh, there's a game that's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, Darksiders.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot similar to that. I played a lot of the gunning class, actually, which I found to be really fun. It was a lot of customization with the weapons and skills, too, for how, your shots would go, what kind of ammo you would carry. It was really fun. And the settings also were fantastic. You start off in this sci-fi world. I believe it's a space station. It's been a couple of years since I played it.
You could make something. You could make something up, and I would believe you.
It starts inside the mouth of a Tyrannosaurus Rex and gets crazier from there. But no, you start off in this crazy sci-fi, fantasy world. Feels kind of like a Blade Runner meets Star Wars. And then your first dungeon, it's this very primordial area. There's weird creatures walking around. It's dense jungles. It's a cool little mesh. I really liked it. Hilary, have you had any experience with the early RPGs at all? Because that's where I'm unfortunately lacking out on.
Unfortunately, I'm lacking as well. I don't know the series very well. I know.
Okay, none of us were Sega kids in the early 90s, I guess.
I was about to say that, yeah. I was a Nintendo kid, too.
I was PlayStation 1.
I'm aware that they are popular and well-liked, especially for RPG fans that had a Genesis. Again, Stephen Meyerink now it's his turn to wince as we're talking about his a favorite series of his. Phantasy Star 4 is the one I see held up as really good. A few times we've talked about covering it on Retro Encounter, but it hasn't happened yet. It may yet. I'm not saying it won't, but we've at least talked about it before. And I had a few friends that were really into some of the mid 2000s Phantasy Star Online ones. I know there was a PSP game and a DS game that I think didn't have an online component, but were inspired by the online games. They're like very hacky slashy, local multiplayer enabled kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I forgot about those.
Yeah, I remember them coming out when I was in college, and 2 or 3 of my friends were super pumped about them. And I think there was a Vita one because I remember like when I was really into trying to play all the Vita RPGs that there was a contingent of Vita fans that were mad that the Phantasy Star Vita game did not come out in North America. But I'd have to Google to find their names or exactly what details I have right or wrong about them. But I know that there's at least those 3.
Yeah.
But I know very little about the Phantasy Star world or gameplay or action, except that I know they're popular, and at least some of the imagery I've seen of them seems cool, but I don't know enough to have a real opinion.
I'm going to make a quick plug. I think there's a good beginning description of at least one of the games in Retro's cat episode because of Meow.
Oh.
Yes, that is true. We did talk about him for a while. I knew nothing about him.
I'm sure it was Fenner that brought that up, wasn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It was either Fenner or Alana.
It seems in character for good old Rob Fenner, but it was I did listen to that episode, but I don't think I edited it, so I don't remember it maybe as intimately as I normally would.
Actually, Mike, you just reminded me. I believe there was also a Phantasy Star Online 3 that was released for the GameCube. That was a TCG game. That was a card game.
Oh, wow.
I honestly didn't remember until we started talking about the DS series, but I believe it kind of functions similar to the Batten Kaido series.
Okay, yeah.
Where you kind of had a deck building system and all that jazz.
Mm-hmm. I follow you. I mean, Batten Kaitos was... I mean, it was a regular RPG, but all of the combat and skills were dominated by cards.
Right,
so
yeah.
Is that what this Phantasy Star Online 3 GameCube is like?
I believe so, yeah. Now, this one, I know not as much as Phantasy Star Online 1 and 2. I remember reading about it a lot and seeing friends playing it, but I believe it's more akin to Batten Kaitos than it is to, say, like, a Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering video game.
Sure, okay, and I mean, I have played my share of TCGs or CCGs over the years, so I'm definitely not opposed to a card game-based RPG combat system, but... Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I have the the time or the stamina to get into one of the Phantasy Star Online games. If I were to jump into the series, I think I would just play 4 for the Genesis.
That's fair.
Because that thing's available in a lot of ways on modern systems, but the others I'm less keen on, I would say.
From what I've heard from a lot of Phantasy Star and Sega fans, I believe that 4 is the one that has aged the best out of all these years. Because I've seen gameplay of, I believe it was either Phantasy Star 1 or 2, and it does have some archaic systems in it.
My impression is that 2 is good, but 4 is the best one.
Mm.
and I think 3 is the one that's supposed to be sort of ambitious but kind of unfinished and ultimately not great. But again, this is just me like hearing snippets of conversations from old episodes of Rhythm Encounter.
Right.
But I think it's enough Phantasy Star talk. But before we close out the podcast, I want to sort of cap off each of our confessions with one final bit. And Hilary, I apologize, I want to pick on you first.
That's fine.
Hilary, the 2 series that Keegan confessed not to have played are Grandia and Breath of Fire, and the two that I confess not to have played are Phantasy Star and Dark Souls. So please give Keegan one recommended game and myself one recommended game that, from your knowledge and experience, that you think each of us should play.
All right. So for Keegan, I'm going to recommend Grandia. It's
cool.
It's a nice sort of, if you're craving something that's kind of will give you that retro, it's fun to explore, long RPG feel, that's definitely the way to go.
Plus, Justin and Fina are just great. I like both of them a lot.
Yep. And this is definitely just because of my personal bias, but I would recommend that you, Sollosi, finish Demon Souls. For whatever reason, it just really clicked with me.
Conveniently, that is the one that I own, so maybe we can make that happen. But do you think is it playable or at least still good even without the online component?
I think so, but I'm definitely personally lean more toward not playing online or playing multiplayer, so I might be kind of biased.
Okay, well, thank you, Hilary. I'll make it my turn now, because it's unfair to have me go last all the time whenever we take turns in any podcast. So I'll try to flip the script a little bit. Now, Keegan, again, you confessed not to have played Grandia and Breath of Fire, and for Hilary, your confessions were Ys and Legend of Heroes. So for you, Keegan, I'm going to recommend you play Breath of Fire 4, because I think that is the best game in that series. It has a lot of really cool stuff in it. Even if it's one of the few retro encounter games I played where I wished it was a little longer. When I got to the final area and the final boss, I'm like, wait a second, that's it, man. Like they could have stretched this out another 5 hours. Come on, man.
Yeah, I was having a hard time picking between that and Grandia.
Yeah, Breath of Fire 4 is very good, and after you finish playing it, you should obviously listen to our 2 podcast episodes that Alana and I recorded on it. And
naturally,
yeah, of course, right. And Hilary, yours is a little bit harder to pick because I've played more games in your set than in Keegan's set. But for you, I think I'm going to recommend Ys the Oath and Felghana, because it is a really good first Ys game. You meet Adol and Dogi. The story is good. There's a bit of a surprise twist before the last area. And it's some really intense, furious action combat. There's a little bit of a grind, but I liked the fighting and the music and the setting so much that I forgave the grind a little bit. So I think that one is definitely worth playing. And I'm not sure if it's my favorite Ys game or not, but it's definitely in my top 2. And I think it's a really good choice for a first Ys.
Great. And I actually conveniently will have a guide as I start mine.
Haha!
Because we did a feature on it.
That's true, yeah. Rob Fenner wrote a So You Want to Get Into Ys mini feature. I think it was earlier this year, but it might have been the end of 2017. But it's a very entertaining read and an informative read if you feel undereducated on Ys. But now, Keegan, it's your turn. One recommendation for me, who has not played Phantasy Star or Dark Souls, and one recommendation for Hilary, who has not played Ys or Legend of Heroes.
Okay, so Sollosi, I'll start with you first. I feel like you should definitely pick up Dark Souls 3. I don't feel like you're missing out much from not playing 1 and 2.
3 over 1. That's a little surprising to me, but continue.
Yes, I feel like it definitely polishes up on some of the quote-unquote features, aka glitches and bugs, that the first 2 games had. It still has a pretty thriving online community, so if you're having any issues with bosses, it won't be as hard as Dark Souls 1 or 2 to find companions. And I feel like it's pretty powerful. Like they've really pushed the PS4, Xbox One, and PC to their limits with some of these boss battles and just how amazing they can get. Highly suggest.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And Hilary, this
Yes.
one, oh man, this one's tough. I am going to go with Ys Origin. Personally, for me, I mean, that was the one I started with, so I'm a little biased. But I think it's a nice entryway into the series. I feel like it explains a lot of the lore that you get to experience as you go later on into these games. And it's fun, fast-paced action combat with 3 different playable characters that all play relatively differently. But
oh yes, they're
basically
I would say very differently. It's like Hilary, I'm gonna do a little bit of extra East-splosion on you.
Go for it.
East Origin's very good, but when you compare Felghana to Origin, Felghana is a little bit more traditional RPG. There's a town, and there's more NPCs to talk to. Mm-hmm. Well, Origin is basically you're at the bottom of a tower full of demons. You got to get to the top. So it's a bit more of a more contiguous world. The setting is really cool. The action's great, and the 3 characters are completely different. Again, this is 1,000 years before East 1, so Adol's not in it, but one of the characters basically plays similarly to Adol, and the other 2 are completely new takes on this kind of action, and there's a lot of East 1 and 2 lore hidden in East Origin, and since I played 1 and 2 before Origin, seeing it all how it all fit together was eye-opening and awesome. East Origin's super cool.
Great. Yeah, I'm as we're talking, I'm remembering more and more of looking at the review, actually, our review for Origin, and I think that recommendation makes a lot of sense for me because, as everyone can probably tell from my Demon Souls recommendation, I do tend to like to start at the beginning of the story and go from there.
Yeah, and also East 1 and 2, they have not aged as gracefully as Origin or Felghana, that's for damn sure.
No.
Origin and Felghana play both quite similarly. I think I could be getting these years wrong. I think one was 05 and one was 07, and they were basically built in the same engine. But so they'll following from one to the other will feel very natural. But they're both great. And one last final recommendation, Hilary. After you've played Trails in the Sky 1 and 2 and East 7,
Right.
you should totally play the Japan-only PSP game that I imported, Ys vs. Sora no Kiseki Alternative Saga, which is a...
Wait, what?
Oh yeah, there's a PSP fighting game about the cast of Trails in the Sky and the cast of Ys 7.
Time out, you are kidding me.
All fighting together. It reminds me a little bit of Power Stone, since it's a 3D environment and there's jumping, blocking, and dashing in it. So, but it is a crazy, wacky fighting game. There's I believe there's 17 playable characters because it's the 7 main characters from Ys 7 plus 1 character from Ys Oath and Felghana, and then 6 of the main characters from Trails in the Sky plus 2 Trails in the Sky villains.
Oh my goodness!
So it is super wild. Just look up Ys Sora Alternative Saga, and you should be able to find videos of it. I imported it on a whim because I saw it for a very cheap amount. I think on eBay when I was just looking at all the Ys and Legend of Heroes games available, and I ended up having so much fun with it. I think it might be the game in my PSP right now, since I have gone back to it over the years. And again, I got that right after I started getting into Ys in probably 2013 or 2014.
Right.
But unfortunately, if you're very mindful of spoilers, don't play that game until you've done Trails in the Sky 2, because it does spoil the identity of one secret villain in that game.
Okay, thank you for that.
But I mean, I know I'm not bothered by spoilers, but a lot of people are, so I try to be careful about them.
I do tend to try and avoid a ton of extra information for games I'm not familiar with or haven't finished.
But yeah,
where possible.
But definitely look up videos of that game, because it is really goofy, intense fighting combat where the action feels like Ys 7, which is also for the PSP, and it's probably built on a similar engine, although I'm not 100% certain of that. But yeah, it's half Trails characters, half Ys characters, and they're just going nuts at each other. And I mean, if I'm talking about Ys vs. Sora Alternative Saga, it's definitely the end of the podcast. So thank you so much, Hilary and Keegan, for talking to me and confessing your sins to me. I know it's very hard, but I think we're all stronger people and more fulfilled people as a result of getting these sins off of our shoulders.
I think we learned a lot. We're closer as colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
All that
Feels good to get it off my chest.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man, you can't see this, of course, but I'm sweating like a pig. I was so nervous this whole time, and now I'm just feeling this great relief. But enough about confessions. Listeners, if you tune in next week, we are posting our second Super Mario RPG episode, where we talk about the second half of the game. I recently finished playing that for this podcast, and I had a lot of fun doing so. It was really a lot of fun playing Super Mario RPG again after many years. And 2 people on that podcast panel are playing the game for the first time, so I'm really eager to hear their thoughts on the end of that game, which is a game I love deeply. And next week, 2 weeks from today, or 2 weeks from this episode, I should say, Peter is bringing the band back together and talking about Darksiders 2.
Know it.
They did and Keegan, yeah, you were on that episode. We did 2 Darksiders episodes in April of last year, of 2017, which was, I believe, Peter, Keegan, and Marcos. Apologies to you, Keegan, for referring to you in the third person.
No, you're okay. It's my first appearance.
Fair, but they're doing a follow-up episode on Darksiders 2, and maybe a little bit of anticipatory talk about Darksiders 3 in 2 episodes from this one. We've started planning out June for Retro Encounter, but we haven't finished all of it yet, so I'm not prepared to talk about episodes after Darksiders 2, but that will all happen soon, and soon my plans will fall into place, but they have not yet. But we are not the only podcast on RPGFan.com. There's also Random Encounter, which is focused more on current events and RPG news. Derek Heemsbergen is the host of Random Encounter, and he does an amazing job. So please follow them as well. It's a separate podcast feed to this one. If you listeners, if you want to contact us, the easiest way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. If you want, you can also find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, on Discord, on Instagram. Either find the link from the rpgfan.com main page or Google RPGFan, and one of those things. It shouldn't be that hard to find. We also have message boards on rpgfan.com that I don't use anymore, but some people do. So if you're a message board person, please hit those up. You may be listening to this podcast on iTunes or Google Play. If you so desire to, please leave feedback. We appreciate all constructive criticism that is left for us. So before we sign off, starting with you, Hilary, how can listeners reach you?
I am EP Fire on the boards, and that's the best way to reach me. Yeah.
All right, and Keegan, your turn.
If you guys are looking for me on the boards, you can find me there as Fozzie Bear. I'm very active on my personal Twitter account. That is at Kaylee Brand. If you want to stop by there, send me a tweet, say hi. I'm always down to talk to peeps.
All right, and me personally, I am Monsoon on the RPGFan.com forums. I am Monsoon Mike on Discord, and at The Real Monsoon on Twitter. I also have a second Twitter called at Evoker for Dogs, where I get weird and talk about Japanese superhero movies mostly. So that is how you can find me. I think that about does it. Thanks for confessing, panelists and listeners. Thank you. Good night and good luck.
Bye, everyone.
Bye!